I have two entrepreneurs who helped bring 7 products to market without fail. Now, how is that possible? We spoke with Dr. Arlen Myers, and he said that the it's he said he's cynical, but there's about a 0.4% chance of bringing something to market and making over 10 million. How do people do that? Let's talk to them. Before we start, my name is Dr. Elsie Coe, and I'm the CEO and founder of Lead Physician Leadership Program for Physicians, and also the Chief Officer of American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention. Today, I'm going to present to you two guys who I've become very friendly with. I trust them. I really enjoy being with them. Mark Ritchart and Ed Chang. And let me tell you, they have quite a story. They graciously agreed to be on with me today. And let me show you a little bit about what they've done recently. They created Avenu Medical and created this game-changing device called the ellipsis catheter, which we haven't seen in over 50 years in dialysis, a new device that's really game changer for dialysis patients in creating fistulas using only percutaneous means. Amazing. I've done it. I've used it. And without further ado, let's bring them on board here. Hi, Mark and Ed. How are you?
Good. Hi, Elsie.
Thank you so much for being here. I know. I hope I owe you so much, but I learned so much from you guys. I want to ask you, how does one bring 7 products to market without fail? There was not even one failure, and I have a lot of questions about that. But let's just start there. How did you do that? How did you even start?
Well, we're going to have to deconstruct this. There are a lot of aspects to success, right? And to go through them briefly, in my opinion, every good startup company begins with a well-vetted problem statement. So you look over and over and over that problem statement. You need to study the area. And if the problem was there 5 years ago, and it's still here today, chances are the same problem will be there 5 years from now. And so you continue to go through that. You seek out experts in the area, and you have to ask yourself 2 questions. Does technology exist in the world today to solve that problem? Number one. And I am the one who has to answer that question based on my background. Number 2, is there a market? In other words, will the market pay you back an R&D investment? So it has to have those 2 characteristics. You have to have a market, and it has to be technically feasible. If that's the case, the next most important thing is the team that you bring together and that you draw upon to solve that problem. And you really need to have experts in every area. Now, we'll get into this later, but where does the problem statement come from? And Eddie can chime in here, but as far as I know, every problem statement given to us has been from a physician. Is that true?
That's exactly right. We spend a lot of time in the hospitals and speaking with doctors, and usually, give you an example for Avenu Medical, we looked at least 40 different ideas before we decided that Avenu was going to be the one that we're going to pursue for vascular access. And it just kept coming up to the surface of a problem that needed to be solved, a clinical problem. And I was familiar with it back in early in my career in the early 80s with the embolectomy catheter. I was the product manager for that product, which was used to clean out the grafts. And the problem statement actually never changed. It's a surgical procedure that was fraught with a lot of clinical issues and high morbidity. So being familiar with the problem, we said this is what we wanted to address.
How much involvement did you have with the physicians, once you got that problem that you wanted to work with? Sound like you've gone through many iterations and you had to figure it out, but how important was it to have physician leadership as part of your team?
It's critical. In fact, you never want to start a company without physician. In our terms, medical devices is what we do. other businesses have their experts, but in our view, it's one of the most important aspects. So let's just use our last company as an example. Dr. Hull was the first one to meet us, and this was 2008-ish.
Yes.
And it
There he
took
is.
him a year of convincing. And he said, Ed and Mark, this is a great problem statement. So we would proceed then to tell him why it wasn't a good problem statement. Every time he would bring up a point, we would try to refute that point. And finally, we ran out of essentially excuses why not to start this, or why to start this company. So we finally, after a year or more, it's probably a year and a half of study, going back and forth with him, we finally said, this is a well vetted problem. It's been around for a long time. This business of making fistulas without the morbidity that's going on today, and really the dysfunction of fistulas. So we decided at that moment, yes, it's worth going after. So going back to earlier in the podcast, Mark, is it possible? And so I had to scratch my head a lot. Yes, technically, I think it's possible. So then I asked Ed, is there a market for this thing?
Then that's exactly the next thing you need to do is how many procedures are actually being done. In this case, it was for vascular access. And we always like to make sure that what people are telling us is exactly the way it's being done. So we did go back to Richmond, Virginia. Jeff introduced us to about two vascular surgeons, and we watched about a dozen open procedures, and the procedure has not changed. So we validated that the procedure was exactly the same as described by Dr. Hall, and that there was a need. Is it possible to do this procedure percutaneous without the need of surgery and get better results than the open procedure?
Wow.
So one of the things that we did was later on, after the first physician gave us the problem statement, we needed a second physician, one who really has a grasp of audience. In other words, not an entertainer, but someone who's very comfortable with others, someone who can talk about it, someone who has the steel nerves to try something for the first time and not have them bother. So in came Dr. Malios, just about the time when FDA was giving us a hard time. No, you're going to have to do another year's worth of data. We go, man, what are we going to do? Someone introduced us to this French, well, he's Greek, living in Paris, Dr. Malios. And he said, this guy is just the kind of guy you're looking for. We met him, and I think, Eddie, we instantly knew this was our guy. He said, I can do this. What's the worst that could happen? Your device could fail, but I'm a surgeon. I can fix it. Right. So he had all the confidence in the world, and that was kind of our 1-2 punch. And as I look back on all the companies we've started, we've always had two physicians.
Exactly right. And,
amazing.
Yeah.
So, you talked about how to be successful, and you really spent a lot of time on the front end. It looks like instead of focusing on the solutions like a lot of people do, you focused on the problems. What's the flip side of it? What would you say are the common mistakes you've seen? And is it just the opposite of what you just said?
I'll let Eddie start off on that one, and I'll add into it.
Well, when you first start the company, it's about spending and how you spend and pursue trying to solve this the clinical problem. You're coming with a clinical solution, and well, for me, I'm on the marketing side. It fell on Mark's shoulders to figure this out technologically and to make sure that we are spending in the right areas. And so most of the money that we are that we're going through, which we have raised on our own precious resources, is in the R&D, and that's, in my opinion, that's where the money needs to be spent, and also the intellectual property.
And part of that spending included us going and watching these procedures. So we said, Dr. Hull, we need to see these procedures. Get us into your hospital. And of course, as you know, it's getting tougher and tougher for non-physicians to get in and into the OR and watch these. But that also is critically important. Let me see what you're doing. Why is it such a pain? What causes time? What are the problems? What are the outcomes? And why are the outcomes so bad? And so we I think saw a dozen procedures through a couple different doctors, and just started educating ourselves on the state of the art. And you'd only know that by being in the trenches with the doctors.
Yeah,
And
that's key. You're in the trenches. You understand every bit of the science behind it, and I think that's one of the key things I've seen myself and who's been able to be successful. Ed, you were saying about spending. What have people spent on that you thought that was wrong?
You know, the biggest mistake that I see new startups, they spend money on a beautiful new building, and the building's a building, and really that doesn't do anything for you. What you do need is you need to make progress on the front of development and innovation. That's the real value. You can always get the building. That always should be one of the last things that you get. You're not impressing anyone with the building. You're not making any headway. And so I always see that. I see also folks, they get a beautiful website and they start advertising their problem statement. I believe that's another mistake as well, to spend money on that. It's in the wrong places.
Got it.
That's right. They are so excited about it. That's something that they can do. It's kind of easy. They can accomplish it. But we think that's a mistake. There's another aspect to that, and let's say it this way: when you're in a new company and you're starting up, keep your mouth shut. Don't go to big companies. Don't tell them what you're doing. Don't sign NDAs all over the place and say, "Hey, isn't this a cool idea?" Because you're opening their eyes to a very important aspect. The fact that you've researched this problem and understood that it's a problem, nobody else has come up with that. Don't share that with them. Make sure that you've got progress. Make sure that the device is working. Make sure that you have patents and that you're defending those patents. Only then do you come out and say, "Hey, we got this cool new device." When we came out at Avenu, then Camus, people came to us and said, "Wow, we thought you guys went out of business. We didn't hear anything from you guys at all." And Eddie and I looked at each other and said, "Mission accomplished." Nobody
How
knew
many
what
years
we were
did
doing.
it take to go to market in general?
Took 3 years of hard R&D. It took 5 years to get through the FDA.
Wow.
And so that's a long time. That was an 8-year period, and that's a little bit longer, but than what we were used to. But if you truly have a novel device, the world doesn't know anything about it, and you have to educate the world.
Yep.
So you have to do a lot of convincing. First, the doc has to convince you that you have that he has got a good idea. Then you've got to convince the FDA that it's a safe product. And then you have to convince CMS that they should pay for it. Now, all this convincing, these are chapters in and of themselves. And we could go on, for example, talking to you about CMS, how many years it took us. We started talking to them in 2014, and we didn't get our first reimbursement at that time, a C code, until 2018.
Yep.
So it took many visits.
How do you persist through? I know you spoke about some moments in time when you almost felt like giving up, and then you have this long, like years and years of having to deal with the FDA. Not to put them down, but it takes a long time, and then you have to build the finances, and then you have to make sure everyone's on board. Your team is still with you, and they're not giving up either. How do you do all of that in such a long period of time? I think I would give up.
We thought about it, but it's a heartfelt belief And we keep going back to the foundation. Did you really understand the problem statement? Is the technology really exist? Is there really a market? You just keep going back to those, and you just refuse. You could call it grit. You could call it fear of failure. You think about it. You've taken money in, and today it's quite expensive to do a medical device, truly unique medical device from scratch. So, do you want to lose all that money for the investors? And we can talk about venture capitalists and private investors. That's a whole nother chapter. But the fear of failure and then the thrill of victory. Those are the two things that motivate you going forward. Right.
Yeah, I commend you. And yeah, I think that is a big question. Like, how do you get the funding in a nutshell? If you could say that in just one sentence, Mark, I know it's like a chapter long thing. What
Well,
would in a nutshell, your advice about getting funding for your idea?
well, I will probably go on and on. And so Eddie's is our marketing guy is a little bit better and to the point. So I'll let Eddie answer that question.
Yeah, we've done 7 companies, and 6 of them we did. Most of it was venture capital funded, and the Avenu was 100%, actually 99.9% private, and we realized that we could do it without bringing the venture capital. We could do it privately, and we raised over 41 million private. We used a lot of the same investors that were supportive of us in prior companies, and we were in a very fortunate position to be able to do that. And when you do that, you control the company and your own destiny, but you also have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders of failure, because you will have lost a lot of personal money that the folks that were putting confidence behind you, and that's really one of the reasons why we're afraid of failing.
Yeah, that's why you kept going too. That's another motivator.
Well,
Besides
that's the fear side, and then
the fear side. Mhm.
On the reward side, it was so rewarding for us to pick up the phone and call each of those investors. Hey, guess what? Your investment has paid off, and we've done great things for society, for the payers, and for the patients. And there was nothing more rewarding than that.
Well, thank you so much for this interview. I just want to say that I want to thank you for being so supportive of physicians. I mean, even with my time with you guys, I really enjoyed it, and I always felt like you had the best interests not only for the patients but for the physicians involved and all the society meetings that you showed up for. So thank you so much, and what you've done to help these dialysis patients is tremendous. I think we're going to end it here, but thank you so much for being on. I might pull you in to ask you about some more things in the future, but how can people reach out to you if they have any questions, and is that possible?
Eddie has his own method. Best way to reach me is texting me on my phone. You're welcome to give that out. And I think Eddie's more of an email guy. I check my email now that I'm retired about once every 2 weeks, so not the fastest way to get to me.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd be
there's
happy
your
to.
email address, I believe, Ed, right?
Yeah.
And
And
thank you everybody for listening. Again, if you have a topic that you want to discuss on this platform regarding physician leadership, please reach out to me at info@drlcco.com. Please check out my website at leadphysician.org if you're interested in getting leadership training yourself. And all the slew of videos that people volunteer to be on my YouTube channel, go and watch and like and share that so that we can continue doing this. Thank you guys so much. Do you have any last words of wisdom?
for those physicians that are interested in doing a startup, True Grit, we'd be happy to provide some guidance and reach through Elsie would be no problem from my perspective.
And Ed and I are not the only two successful entrepreneurs. Reach out to successful people in the space that you want to get involved with. And we call it hitching your wagon to an expert that you really like that's accomplished. And you can go a long way that way.
Great. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Until next Sunday.